Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
My guest today is Josh Lewis. Josh is a CPA who lives in Tulsa and works for the Oklahoma State Auditor's Office. A former candidate for city auditor with over a decade of experience in auditing governments, Josh has a unique and practical perspective as an outside observer of politics put into practice. Josh graduated from college of the Ozarks, Hard Work U, majoring in accounting with a minor in speech communication, where he was president of the College Republicans. Though a lifelong Republican, Josh stepped down as a treasurer at the Tulsa County Republican Party in 2016, when he could no longer support the candidate chosen to represent his party. We welcome Josh to the show.
Powered by Riverside.
Well, today we welcome Josh to the show. How you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing great, Keith.
Good to have you on. I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Great to be here.
So I'm going to give you an easy question to kind of warm you up. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, gosh. I don't know if that's an easy question, but this is maybe this is cheating. I'm just going to throw it out there because the best advice I ever received that springs to mind is actually a line from a song I heard once. So it wasn't something given to me directly, but maybe I'll say I received it. Back in the day, I worked in public accounting, CPA firm. Would not trade that experience for the world. Definitely enjoyed it. I was in my 20s. That's the time to be a workaholic if you're going to be one. But in that environment, I just remember how empty and materialistic it felt. And the line I heard from a song once was, "Wealth and fame are just a game. I want something better." And I even put that kind of in my cubicle there. And we can, spend hours exploring what is the something better. But I think that was kind of something that helped ground me in that period was like, yes, I'm working hard. I'm grateful to accumulate wealth, but I want something more out of life than just this material pursuit.
I like that. And songs, sometimes my favorite things come from movies, from quotes from movies. So for a long time, my favorite quote was, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." But
Star Trek?
Yeah, it was Star Trek.
Yeah, that's a classic. I maybe I don't watch the right kind of movies. I don't know that I get too many inspirational quotes from.
Well, it's been a while. They're not usually inspirational these days, but they may have been in the past.
That's true.
So, Josh, tell us something about yourself that most people don't know.
Well, I have all sorts of little oddities, but I do cold water dips. Here in Oklahoma, I don't do it year round. It's just I have a pool in the backyard, and when the weather gets cold, I don't know why. It just releases some sort of endorphins. I don't have any evidence this is helping me at all, but I feel good when I do them. And weirdly enough, the colder it gets, the more I want to get into the water. I have literally the night before taken a sledgehammer and beat through 2 feet of ice so that I could get through the hole in the morning before, and I just loved it.
I think it's in Detroit. They do the cold water dive, or is it Chicago? One of those two where they all go down to the lake in the middle of December and jump into the water. It's just hilarious.
I know most of the American Northeast, of course, New England states, they do that all the time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Chicago or Detroit. I remember because they have the cold water plunge every year, and all these people go in their bathing suits and they go dive in and jump out of the water. It's just, I watch it and go, oh, interesting, and then I turn the channel because I'm like, there's something obviously odd about these people.
Yeah, probably.
So I'm always curious, our lives we run across people throughout our lives who are impactful for us. Who are some people in your life that served as an inspiration or a mentor for you?
Well, and again, this may be a cheating answer, but given the topics we're presumably going to cover today, because you'd asked me this question in advance, I kind of thought through it, and the names that are coming to mind, I don't know any of these people. Obviously, they have all died long before I was on the scene. But in terms of, say, like conservatism, and I'll even say the political moment we're in, I think sometimes I draw most of my inspirations from individuals who fought the good fight and never lived to see the fruition of their efforts. And we can go through, name after Russell Kirk, for instance, wrote The Conservative Mind. The original title of that book was The Conservative Route, because he was going to describe a philosophical orientation in the United States that he felt was in decline and possibly not going to exist anymore. Edmund Burke, the father of modern conservatism, fought against the French revolutionaries and the Jacobins. Literally, we don't know where he's buried. We know the cemetery, but we don't know the tombstone, because he wanted an unmarked grave in case the Jacobins won and took over the United Kingdom and, I guess, defecated his corpse.
Sure.
Whittaker Chambers believed the Soviets would ultimately prevail in his fight against Alger Hiss. And Barry Goldwater, presidential candidate in 1964, lost in the most lopsided landslide defeat in U.S. history, or at least one of them. I don't necessarily advocate or endorse everything these individuals did, but it was because of their efforts that the conservatism that I aspire to even exists today. And the majority of them never got to see that. So I think if there's any inspiration there, it's like, you know what? I think it makes sense in your life to try to build something that you recognize I may not get to live to see this.
Right. I like that. So I'm curious, as we begin to get in this conversation, to learn about your journey. We talked about you being a CPA, but give us kind of your backstory.
Well, I was born and raised here in Oklahoma, very red state, obviously. I went to college of the Ozarks near Branson, Missouri, where I got my degree in accounting. I've been interested in politics pretty much ever since my teenage years, I suppose. Maybe even before that, it was kind of an odd dog. I never cared for sports, just didn't interest me for whatever reason. So I think this was sort of it scratched that same itch a lot of people have. I probably a lot healthier if I would have preferred sports, because I think politics can be not the healthiest thing to spend too much. It can if you're not careful, and I honestly think it is. I honestly think one of the best. If you want to go down this road, you need to stay between two ditches. One is becoming completely cynical, and one is just being so idealistic you can't see. You're getting high on your own farts, as they say. You can't see where you're going. But that was sort of my upbringing. Very Christian, very conservative. In terms of more kind of where I'm at now, I haven't so much rejected my past as I felt that I have, I hope, grown in a depth and understanding of it. In that I think there is much about the American right today that I don't celebrate, and I think is very destructive, and is not conducive to either good government or, honestly, good citizenship. But I do think I recognize that there was something there at base, at root, that I've been able to explore and say, wow, there's a depth here and there's a beauty to this that is not often talked about. And I don't want to attribute it all to this, but in a large part, this journey began in 2016 after the tumultuous 2016 election of Donald Trump, when I noticed a lot of my friends and family who we'd had our differences, but I presume, hey, we're mostly on the same page politically, went a different direction. And I really wondered why. Why did we see this so different? And the more I began to explore, the more I kind of came with, I've been a conservative my whole life, and I've never even read these. I didn't even know these people existed with these depths of these intellectual arguments. I want to tell other people about this, right? Why are we having these ridiculous kind of culture war fights when there's actually a very rich inheritance of arguments here we could be drawing on? I may be a little far afield from your question, but did I capture it?
No, you did. It was really good. And it kind of leads to my next question, because I think when we talk about the word and the term conservatism, we haven't defined that. So I'm gonna have you define for the audience so that we're on the same page by what you mean by conservatism. Because some people just think conservatism means the Republican Party.
Sure. And in all fairness, I cannot completely define conservatism. I've been trying to do that now for many, many years. And I feel like I understand it better. And the more I understand, the more I realize, wow, you can't hardly define this thing. But a couple of thoughts that might help kind of orient us in this conversation. I would say, first and foremost, conservatism is not strictly an ideology. Liberalism is an ideology. Marxism is an ideology. And what I mean by that is it's a formula for, hey, here is what we're advocating politically. And it doesn't matter where you were born or when you were born. This is what we aspire to politically. Conservatism is far more contextually based. In other words, what it means for me to be an American conservative is very different than what it means for me to be a conservative, say, in Iran today. I am not a conservative in Iran. I'm not interested in restoring and conserving all traditions. But to be an American conservative means I am interested in conserving those parts of the United States that I consider to be our inheritance, namely the founding, and ironically, in a large sense, what I would call a classical liberal tradition. So I don't think it's an oxymoron to say that a conservative is one who tries to conserve liberalism. It's maybe a more classical understanding of it. But that being said, another thing I'll add to it is I think one of the most succinct definitions I ever heard was the late philosopher Sir Roger Scruton said that conservatism begins with this attitude that all reasonable people can agree with, that the good things we have in this life are easily destroyed but not easily created. And therefore, the proper orientation towards much of our life and the things that we value is to work hard to think about the long term and to try to conserve those things. Those two kind of pointers there obviously are just beginning a definition, but I really think that's where it begins, is that the conservative, if we contrast it, say, with the progressive in the United States, the conservative's orienting virtues is humility and especially gratitude. Here are the things we have. I didn't earn this, but I'm going to darn sure make sure that I keep it safe. The progressive seems to be more oriented towards justice. This is what's not right. Here are the people who are suffering. What do we need to do to effectively change that? Neither of those, by the way, are wrong attitudes. You have to have both in equal measures at some point for a society to work. But the reason I stand with conservatism is because I think as a political ideology, you start to get into trouble when you seek justice through chiefly political ends.
That's good. I would say that conservatism has not had in a long time a good communicator of conservative values. And so what's happened is, from just looking at it from a distance, when you ask people what it means to be conservative, they can't define it either. And they also can't tell you what the values of it are. And I think that's something I've seen that's lacking. Even with the progressives, I can't really define what progressives stand for. I mean, we've lost the ability to have dialogue and conversation and debate on a public forum and a public stage. What are our beliefs and our goals and our view of the country? And so we just kind of end up yelling at each other, and we're not having a discussion about it.
You know what's interesting, and it's probably fair to say progressives or the left, but it's certainly true of conservatives. When you have those internal dialogues, you end up having just as many debates, but they take place inside your side. Conservatives love debating each other. And it's really interesting because whenever you can kind of get it away from the left versus right, metric that we're so used to, there's a wealth of things within it that can actually be edifying to try to determine, well, what are the limitations of this idea and what is the best expression of it?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And now a word from one of our sponsors, For Freedom Mobile. If you're using AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, then you're being tracked. Mobile providers collect your location, communications, internet activity, even your financial transaction. They sell that data to anyone willing to pay for it and provide it to the government without a warrant. Switch to For Freedom Mobile, and you won't ever have to worry about big tech or Big Brother tracking you through your mobile phone again. For Freedom Mobile provides secure, unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data for just $29.99 a month, and it includes free internet roaming in over 200 countries. Sign up for the service by visiting forfreedommobile.com and using the promo code BRIDGEBUILDERS to get your first month for only $9.99. See forfreedommobile.com for details, just like the number 4, freedommobile.com. So let's dig a little deeper into that. You talked about we're on polar opposite sides of this argument. Why are we so divided? What happened in American history? Or maybe there was a moment that we just stopped having a conversation and we just went to our corners and said, you're the enemy and I want to talk to you.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can give an answer that is satisfactorily all-encompassing, say. However, and we're fortunate in this country that while we are divided in a manner that I think most people, left or right, would agree this is not good, and if we keep going this direction, it's going to get worse. We haven't hit Civil War levels yet. You know, that happened once in this country. So things can get a lot worse than this. We haven't hit bottom yet. I think, very broadly, the overarching reason why we are divided is because human beings by nature don't naturally function in a constitutional republic. What I mean by that is, whether you take it as evolutionary biological or just the way we're created, I think throughout history, the way human beings work is we either work in small roving tribes or a monarchy, right? A strong central figure. What we've done here in the United States is something very unnatural. That doesn't mean bad. It just means not in accordance with our natural tendencies to kind of have these warring factions or look to a strong central figure. And you can do that. I mean, most of human history has sort of taught you can't. The American founding fathers were like, well, here, hold my beer, watch us go. And they have devised what appears to be a very brilliant structure of government that allows this to work. But it's not natural. And so I think part of that issue here is we have a false mindset that American democracy should be easy. And if it's not working, there's somewhere somebody's doing something wrong. And that might be true. But the founders had the mindset American democracy, or they would call the republic self-governance, is not easy. It's not natural. It may not work, and it's going to require an enormous amount of work on your part to keep your impulses in check so that you can be the sort of people fit for self-governance. John Adams put it most succinctly that our Constitution is designed for a moral and religious people. It's wholly unfit for any other. So I say all this to say that, again, this is the very broad view. This is not getting out of the nitty-gritty of media or politics or what's gone wrong there. I just think as human beings, what we're doing is very challenging, worth the fight, but it's very challenging. Added to that, I think the conservative voice I would point to, Yuval Levin, probably best articulates kind of how I feel about this, which is we are also experiencing a complete break within our institutions, because it is the institution, that which stands between the individual and the central state, that allows us to exist in this unnatural state, that allows us to stop being so concerned with, hey, what are the people in San Francisco doing? Or what are the people in Branson, Missouri doing? Because we have a lot of value we derive in our individual lives at a more local level. And what Yuval Levin argues is that our institutions have more and more and more become performative rather than formative. And what he means by that is an institution, whether that's the family, the neighborhood, or your church or synagogue, is by definition supposed to be something that in theory is formative. I go into this thing and I'm supposed to come out different somehow, hopefully better, but at least changed somehow. It's supposed to change me as a person. And unfortunately, what we're seeing these days is they've ceased to be formative and they've become performative. We enter an institution as a means of a platform so that the world can see us through that institution. And Yuval Levin says the response to this, or where we ought to go, is each of us individually ask, okay, given where I am, the institutions I inhabit, how ought I to perform? How ought I to behave? How do I let this thing form into the sort of person I need to be? And so that's kind of a long-winded answer, I guess, to your question. But those are kind of the two things I would think is A, it's not natural, and B, we're living in a unique time in which we are treating almost everything as a platform to display ourselves rather than trying to be subjected to the value of an institution.
That's good. I want to go back to something you said, because I think as I look at this from the 30,000 foot view, I see one group of people who are kind of the small roaming tribe you described. And they're kind of going, let's just get to a place where we can be that small roaming tribe where we're safe from the monarchy who's trying to impose his will on us. And I think that's the tension I'm seeing in America today. is you got the monarchy trying to impose its will on the small roaming tribe. And so we're getting to our corners trying to find a place where we feel comfortable. Some people are going, I want a bigger monarchy. Some are going, no, I want a smaller tribe. And so I see that tension also in our political debate.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, and I don't know if you had a particular group or ideology or organization in mind, but it's been my observation that many Americans, maybe not most, but many Americans seem to think of themselves in that small tribe. What's weird is whether you ask Democrats or Republicans, we're all losing. Everybody thinks we've lost somehow. Like, well, we can't all be losing. Somebody's got, it's so the Republicans say, well, the Democrats have got this in the bag and we're the ones losing, or vice versa. Or the more frequently you won't hear losing, you'll hear the other side is somehow uniformly in lockstep, and they're working in concert, and therefore it's going to be very difficult to beat them, because even though they're wrong all in the same way. Whereas we just fight with each other. It's like, that's literally what the other side says. And so I think unfortunately, when you end up with this loss of the intermediary institutions in between, you end up in this weird scenario where everybody feels like they're in a very powerless tribe, and they almost inadvertently, whether they want to or not, empower the central authority, which just further exacerbates the whole problem.
No, I agree with you. And I see that a lot, because you do feel defeated sometimes, because you're like, do I have any control of my life? And I think the COVID situation, I think, really kind of even put those dividing lines in even more, because now you became not just political with one side or the other. Now you became whether you were vaxxed or unvaxxed. And that created even more division. And we kind of saw along the same lines, typically one group was more of this than the other. And so that added more tension to our situation. Yeah,
it does. And it's you can see this whenever something new pops on the scene, Russia invading Ukraine or COVID, that there's this moment where it's almost as if we're all trying to figure out, how does this square with my tribe, right?
Right.
And there sometimes you can see moments in which it's not clear, and you get almost the more nuanced debate that I wish we had more often. And then within a process of time, maybe it's not fair to say the Russia versus Ukraine model, because that's not yet quite as contentious. There seems to be more uniformity in the United States around that issue. But you can see through a process of time, people begin to stop thinking about it, because it becomes easier and easier to equate, okay, if I believe this, I'm with this group. If I believe this, I'm with this group.
Although I did see today a new poll that said that Democrats are more in support of the Ukraine war funding than Republicans are. So it's becoming more polar.
It is.
More divided. Yeah. So it always gets there at some point.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you a question. It's something I read in your bio that I want you to go deeper with. You said in 2016, that was a moment for you. You want to dig into why that was?
Well, so the easiest way I can think to explain this, and maybe I sound like I'm coming way far afield, but I promise this does relate. Lori Gottlieb was an author who wrote a book called Marry Him that I read years ago. It's an argument for why it's ideal oftentimes for women to settle for Mr. Good Enough, because if they just keep waiting for Mr. Perfect, their life will go by and then they'll say, wow, why did I do that? Obviously, I'm not her target audience, but I had read the book. I found it very interesting. And I bring it up because there was a study done in it that I thought was fascinating. And in this study, what they did is they took couples on their first date. And if that couple got married, they would continue to follow them throughout the study. And I can't remember, like 1 year, 12 years, 20 years, or whatever that period of time was. What they did was at their initial first date, they would ask the question to each of them individually, how did this date go? How did you feel about it? And they would kind of mark that down. Okay, here's how, on a scale of 1 to 10 or this, that, or the other, how each individual felt about it. If they were married and then they tracked their marriage through the process of years, if their marriage was going well by their own admission, or if it was going poorly by their own admission, how they thought about that first date actually changed. They remembered it differently. If their marriage was going well, they remembered it better than when they were asked, say, 10 years prior. If it was going poorly, they remembered it worse. And the reason I say this is because 2016, I want to try to be careful that I think sometimes we look at, say, the ascendancy of someone like a Donald Trump as this odd thing happened in that moment. In reality, you don't get to a Donald Trump unless there were a lot of odd things happening all along. You just didn't really notice them. And what I noticed, I guess, in that 2016 era was, that crazy guy that comes to Republican meetings? I wonder if he makes up a bigger percentage of the constituency than what I thought. Like, maybe he's not just that guy we put. Maybe I need to pay more attention to that. Maybe I didn't see some of the warts on my side, if you will. Now, I've not gone, there are some who have taken that to go 180 degrees the other direction, and they're essentially moderate Democrats, and I don't. In a lot of ways, I think I'm more conservative. I'm just in an older sense of the word. But I think that's what I mean by 2016 sort of being that formative year. It's not that changed everything. It's that's when it became harder to not see things that were there all along.
So how did 2020 impact you then?
I was very surprised by 2020 being such a large turnout election between both Biden and Trump. And this is part of my cynicism, and I am totally fine saying I'm in the minority here. I was surprised there were that many Americans that actually cared enough for either of those two candidates to get out in that larger percentage. I do think oftentimes it was less a matter of I just love Joe Biden than it was Donald Trump is dangerous or the Democrats are dangerous, and so I got to vote for this guy. 2020, the election, really, it wasn't the election itself. It was more the aftermath. It was more Donald Trump's continuous drumbeating of this whole thing is rigged, which obviously culminated in January the 6th. But, and here again, this is something I think we're in danger of trying to pick a moment in time, January 6th, and say, here's where everything changed. Donald Trump literally said in the debate with Hillary Clinton in 2016 that he would hold us in suspense the night of the election. That if he had some reason to believe, if it was real close or something, he straight up said, hey, there's things going on. You would not believe what's going on. He was basically laying the groundwork to do in 2016 what he did in 2020. So this was not a change for Trump. This is who he was all along. And I bring that up because there's a lot of things that Donald Trump did that I might disagree with, a lot of things I could agree with, but I think we need to be careful to sort of create an organization or a hierarchy in our minds. What is something I didn't prefer versus what is something that is truly a danger to the republic, and someone who in that position questions the results of an election and seeks to undermine it, I think is one of the most dangerous things we can have in that position.
And now we question all elections. So
yeah, in effect. And to be honest, part of this is we're just in this weird stuck mode where so many elections, you take the national popular vote out of it, just the electoral college or even state by state, the margins are so razor thin that it allows for this sort of thing. If we had to go back to like the 1980s or the 1930s, where it's like, okay, that guy won by a good 10%, we wouldn't be having these conversations. But the United States is extremely divided. We don't have anything even anywhere near approaching consensus. And so it creates an opportunity, say, for demagogues to exploit that.
And I want to go to bed at 10 o'clock and know who won. I don't want to wait a week.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I want that too. But to be fair, that was sort of my, I don't care if it takes a week or a month. It's more at the end of the day, does the predominant portion of the United States say, yes, that is the person who won, whether I wanted them to or not?
So as a conservative, what do you see as the positive for America going forward from the conservative perspective?
Well, I think we live in this very weird juxtaposition that if you were to resurrect almost any of our ancestors, they might look at us and say, what are you complaining about? Materially speaking, not only you, but the entire planet has never had it so good. You were in the most enviable military secure position our nation has ever been in. I mean, the idea that we have no military rival of any stripe that could actually pose a threat to the homeland, that's new. That's really, really new. And also to a certain degree, I think while culturally speaking, it is fair to say conservatism has lost much, I think sometimes that can be overplayed. I do think that there's still a predominantly conservative, if we mean that by a value for marriage, a value for the sanctity of the family, a respect for institutions. I think that is embedded in the American character. And it might look a little different than it has in the past. And I don't mean that it's healthy or that it's whole or that it's even what it used to be, but it's not as lost oftentimes as what is presented. We have had for many years, maybe even centuries, as a general rule, the elite of this country are more progressive, and the people themselves, I'm not talking about politically, but just the way they live their daily lives, are more conservative. And I don't think that's changed. Now, I don't know. All that being said, I mean, things aren't perfect, and you can sort of project these things outward and say, okay, even though we have it so good, bad times are on their way if we don't find a way to address some of these issues. But I think starting there, again, with that gratitude of you don't build things if you think the world's falling apart. You build things when you say, you know what, we've actually inherited some pretty wonderful things, and let's build on top of that.
So I'm just kind of curious to get your perspective as a conservative on the culture wars, because one of the arguments liberals have against conservatives are you're insensitive when it comes to the issues of the culture. So how would you respond to the liberal who accuses conservatives of that?
Of insensitivity?
Yes.
Well, it's a big topic. I mean, first of all, I am, both personality-wise and also my political orientation, I am the last conservative to be interested in owning the libs or in liberal tiers. Part of the reason I'm not interested in that is because I think it's often used to exploit voters or to prop up politicians at the expense of the voters. Ron DeSantis, for instance, going after Disney. I'm not a big fan of Disney. Okay, fine, whatever. But did that make anyone's life better? Well, it made Ron DeSantis' life better because now he's this hero in town. When it comes to, and part of the reason I say all this is because I think the culture wars in a certain facet are more important than our political battles. I also think the right is almost never fighting them. From the pure perspective of the liberals' accusation about insensitivity, I kind of have two mindsets. And maybe this is just because I'm on the right. I think there were multiple instances in which, as a culture, we are too sensitive. I also think it's entirely fair that, let me back up and try this a different way. I don't appreciate my side, shall we say, consistently trying to stoke those concerns, consistently trying to own the libs, trying to, produce liberal tiers. That can be fun, and if we're just talking about the entertainment value, maybe there's some value to it, but we're not going to change hearts and minds by insulting people. And I think what I was saying before the audio got cut was mostly I'm upset about this because I think the culture war is real and valid, but I think it's misconstrued to be these sorts of, if I can embarrass you for the position you hold.
Right.
To me, the culture war is the health of the culture, and the culture is always superior to our politics. The problem there, of course, is that policy, while it can have an impact on culture, usually can't have a great impact on culture, or to the extent it can have an impact, it's almost always negative. There are very few laws we can pass for people to genuinely be good people. And so most of this is going to have to come at an individual or organizational level. There is no policy solution exhaustively. And so I think part of my concern with what the right does often is it interrupts us from the good work of trying to engage the culture in a positive way that lifts people up, because we're maybe correctly identified some excesses or bad things in the culture, but just pointing them out and making fun of them and trying to embarrass folks is in no way improving anyone's lives. The other aspect of this is that I think it also creates an opportunity for politicians to exploit voters, to advance legislation that in no way improves anyone's lives, but it does put their it does put them front and center with most people. I think of Ron DeSantis, for instance, and he has some good qualities. I'm not just anti-Ron DeSantis, but a lot of what he does is he leads with what is the cultural issue of today and how do I insert myself into this fight? And I think that's kind of an odd much of the right is looking for a fighter. I kind of get that. But at the end of the day, it's like, but this is not doing anything to advance our cause, if you will. It is helping Ron DeSantis. And I think in the end, I think that's it leads to bad things if we incentivize politicians to just behave in a way that makes us feel good, but in no way improves anyone's lives.
It goes back to what you said before, the performative part of it. If our government becomes only performative, that doesn't help anyone.
Yes. And you ask this question about the culture. It's such a big issue because I'm always concerned when I respond to something like this by omitting something. I'm implying I'm okay with it. There's a lot going on in our culture I'm not okay with. There's a lot of rot. There's a lot of evil. I don't know how else to put that. There's a lot of evil going on in our culture. I just think that we handle it in such a clunky manner that I don't see it getting better anytime soon.
Yeah. So I'm always curious. This is a great conversation. But as you've been going down this journey of conservatism, out of all of this, when your life is over, what do you hope you leave as a lasting legacy from this journey you've been going on?
Oh, that's yet again another good question that I don't know if I have a good answer to. But I think what springs to mind is less a specific of here's the thing I want to do. And I'll approach this from, as a conservative, this is something I hadn't really touched on, as a Burkean conservative, say, I'm a big believer in providence. I'm not a determinist. I don't think the future is determined for us or that our efforts don't matter. But I do think that in the end, all things are guided by God, that things are being worked to his purpose. Now that, usually in an American sense, what we mean by that is everything's going to work out just fine. For I know the plans I have for you. Jeremiah 29:11. Well, if you read the full chapter, those plans are, by the way, you're going to die in captivity, but the next generation is going to experience, the promise. And so I say that kind of hearkening back to what we were talking about earlier. I may not live to see the fruits of this. I think I talked about conservatism being gratitude, but it's also humility. And I think we have to be humble to recognize providence at work. And I think that's what anchors us and allows us to work beyond our lives or to hope for a brighter future, even if I don't get to see it. There is a story, I don't know who the man was, and he died years before I was born. In the church I'd grown up in, it wasn't our church, it was one we were affiliated with in Pitcher, Oklahoma, very tiny town, northeastern corner of the state. Church was called Douthat, tiny church, probably a one-room sanctuary, very small church, wooden floors, old-fashioned, probably a building wouldn't hold more than 60 people. And there was an individual there who had given his life to Christ, and he was praying in this church one day, and he had a burning desire to be a preacher. He wanted to spread the word. And he said the testimony this man had was that he felt very called in that moment. God said, I want you to be the janitor. And what they said of this man was that so long as he was alive, that church was clean. Like, notice those floors were spotless. And to me, I think that's in part what providence is it's sort of God has got this, and I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. Maybe I'm not called to something. Maybe I don't know what my calling is, but I know that these are the things I can do and the things I can work for, and I may never live to see it. And it might be kind of even a demeaning task that I can't, nobody's going to celebrate the fact I was a janitor in a tiny church nobody's ever heard of. But I'm doing a good work, and I trust that God has got this.
I love that. So, Josh, for those who want to follow you, learn more about you, where can they find you on social media?
Well, social media, Saving Elephants. I compete with all the people trying to save actual elephants. So don't bother Googling me. And with a name like Josh Lewis, you're not going to find me. If you put in like Saving Elephants Josh or Saving Elephants Conservative, you could probably find me. If you're on a podcast platform, Saving Elephants, you could find the show easy enough.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for what you do. And I agree with you. I just hope that we can get back to having the conversation, having the debate, because I think we, as a people, iron sharpens iron as we debate tough issues and look at it from different perspectives and figure out what is the best way for us to approach the challenges ahead. And remember that we are in the greatest country in the world, and we have been blessed. And how do we celebrate the fact that we've been blessed?
Indeed.
So thank you so much, Josh, for being on the show.
Well, thanks, Keith. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter at RevHeadpin or on his website at alightbreaksthrough.org. Thanks again and tune in next time.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter at RevHeadpin. Thanks again and tune in next time.